Hi, this is Shep Altshuler, publisher of TimeSharing Today. Welcome to this broadcast of TimeSharing Today Radio, featuring news and views of owners and industry professionals. Today we are being joined by Brian Heller, Executive Vice President with Tricom Management, a professional timeshare resort management company located in Anaheim, California. We will be discussing guidelines established by the Timeshare Board Members Association in its pillars of board member fiduciary responsibilities. This interview is of timely importance to owners and those charged with the duties of timeshare resort governance. Hi, Brian. Welcome to the broadcast.
Hi, Shep. Nice to be here.
Yeah, take a few minutes and give our listeners a brief description of your background in the timeshare industry.
My background in real estate in general started years ago in real estate development, and in that I developed a number of both residential and commercial properties. That led me into the timeshare finance business. And from there, I got involved with a number of the developers at the time, and that led me to a relationship with Tricom, and I've been associated with Tricom for almost 13 years now.
Also, talk a little bit about Tricom and what the focus of his business is.
Tricom is a complete timeshare resort management company. We do everything from corporate oversight to on-site management. We handle financials, rentals, resales, every aspect of a timeshare operation we handle at Tricom, and Tricom has been doing this since 1979.
Do you concentrate in any specific geographical area? What is the range of resorts that you work with?
Our corporate office is located in Anaheim, California, and we have properties from California all the way to Florida and in several states in between. So we have a broad scope. We're growing and expanding each year.
What's the current number of resorts that you're managing?
We have 15 now, and we have 2 more coming online in the first quarter of next year.
Fortunately for us, you were there at the beginning of TBMA as one of the original advisors that helped with the planning. One of the key elements that we put together with a lot of help from you was the TBMA's pillars of board member fiduciary responsibility. Why don't you provide a little bit of the background behind that and give us a little bit of an overview of what the pillars are all about?
Well, as you well know, Shep, TBMA's mission from its inception has been to provide education, information, guidance, and support to timeshare board members. The pillars were developed as a foundation for responsible timeshare board member oversight. It's designed to incorporate the disciplines needed to facilitate a successful and sustainable timeshare resort.
And why is it important, particularly in today's economy and the current environment, for timeshare owners and their boards of directors to be aware of the pillars?
Right now, in our evolution of timeshare, long-term sustainability of timeshare resorts is becoming more and more of a challenge with aging properties and changing demographics. In order to effectively manage all the critical components necessary to sustain these resorts, board members as well as owners need to understand the need for and the functionality of each of the pillars and how they integrate into the practical applications of resort operations.
And are they set in stone? Are they more or less designed to be guidelines?
They're designed to be guidelines. They're absolutely not set in stone. These are pillars that were developed with the understanding that these are core fundamental areas that should be incorporated into resort operations. We're aware of a number of resorts, not that we manage, but out there that don't incorporate all of them, but we feel it's prudent to have each one of these functioning in a resort operation.
Why don't you give us a little bit of a recap of what the 8 pillars are?
Sure, and these are in no particular order because they all integrate. But we have legal, which is having legal counsel representation, so board members are not making legal decisions on their own. Insurance, meaning having a good, qualified insurance consultant overseeing and evaluating insurance needs for both the property and the board members. Financials that are complete and accurate and detailed so that there can be consistent tracking of the financial health of the resort. audits, financial audits. Some states require audits, some states do not, but we strongly recommend audits in every case. Reserve studies. It's important to take the time to put a reserve study together, whether you do it internally or engage a third party, and then to fund that reserve based on the study. Communication. That sounds like an obvious one, but I actually met with the board not long ago, and I asked them how they communicate with the owners, and their response was, we don't do any communication at all. And now more than ever, it's so important to communicate consistently with your owners. And along with communication is disclosure, knowing what to disclose and how to disclose it to your owners. Not everything needs to be disclosed, but those things that are important should be disclosed, and owners should be aware. And the last one, which can help any resort and is becoming more and more important in managing the finances, is non-assessment revenue. Any revenue that can be generated that's not burdening the owners to help support the operation.
Now, these are all part and parcel of the agendas that we've had since we started, several years ago with our TBMA meetings. But can you provide a few real-life circumstances facing boards today and then relate them to the pillars, especially in the case of legacy resorts?
Sure. One of the challenges, obviously, is maintenance fees. Owners are required and need to pay those to sustain the operation. But non-assessment revenue, one of the pillars that we mentioned, is one that is often overlooked or not fully utilized. And we've been able to, at Tricom, find a number of different ways to support the financial operations with non-assessment revenue. That's an area that can tremendously help legacy resorts if it's done effectively. Another one is insurance. We've run across a number of legacy resorts that have in their governing documents insurance requirements. And I've been approached by board members saying that we know we're out of compliance on our insurance, but we can't find the type of insurance needed based on our governing documents. And we actually took over an association a couple of years ago, and they had been operating that way for several years. The first thing we did was bring a qualified appraiser in to appraise the property. Then we worked with our insurance consultant, and within a very short period of time, we had full insurance coverage, totally in compliance with their governing documents, something that they had been told for years didn't exist. So in each of these areas, it's important to work with professionals that can find and provide what's necessary. And it's getting more and more challenging for the legacy resorts.
There is an issue that will be surfacing in the next several years, and that's the decision to continue or discontinue the resort's timeshare plan. How significant a factor is that, and how complex is that?
It's very significant, and it is very complex. In the best situations, it's complex. There are several considerations in the evaluation process. Current ownership percentage and ownership trends, property age, condition, rehab requirements, and then the governing documents. What's required in there? What conditions need to be met? What type of voting is required? And most important is their active participation by your owners. Going back to the pillar of communication, if you haven't been communicating with your owners for years or very limited communication, and all of a sudden you're trying to communicate with your owners about such a major event, it becomes very challenging. So once the analysis is done, you need to carefully look at your governing documents and then have a very specific plan as to how you're going to communicate with your owners about it.
Now, is there a step-by-step of what do HOA board members and their owners need to do now with respect to plan termination?
There is. It's a great question, and the very first step is to engage legal counsel and review your governing documents. I would strongly recommend that any board not try to review those on their own and interpret them, but review them with their legal counsel. Some documents are very specific to termination, and others are completely silent to the topic. So that's your first step. Once you determine what that is, then you go back through the analysis of your ownership percentage, trends, property condition, and the other component that at some point you want to consider is the underlying value of the property, and that would require an appraisal from a qualified appraiser. And if a board does get to that point, they want to look very carefully at the scope that they give to that appraiser, so that they're appraising the property in a way that is meaningful value or opinion of value for a possible liquidation of the property.
So there's ample time now to take a serious look at this serious situation. So this is the time really to get started. And it shouldn't be a back burner issue. Would you agree with that?
You're absolutely right. It's something that boards want to and need to be proactive about. Number one, understanding what's in their governing documents, and if there's something in their documents that may need to be changed or modified, because that process in itself can be very cumbersome and time-consuming. So if they determine that their documents aren't specific enough or maybe completely silent about it, and they want to include something in there, it may take a vote of the majority of owners to make a change in their governing documents, which we've seen, and we've assisted associations in making changes to their governing documents, so it can be done, but in itself, it's a long process and has several steps in it. So it's an issue that needs to be looked at and addressed, especially as properties age, and either money has to be put into those properties to sustain them, or termination and liquidation needs to be one option to be considered.
These decisions have to be looked at when you talk about legal counsel, because there may be issues of due process with owner voting and state statutes. Am I correct on that?
Absolutely. And that goes back to, what do your governing documents say, and what statutes are in your state regarding that. The Timeshare Act for various states sometimes is very specific about certain areas, and you absolutely want to follow a track that has been reviewed and approved by your legal counsel, so that you're not stepping out of bounds in that process.
Yeah, now, moving on to another interesting topic is, back in 2011, when the initial plans for forming TBMA were being made, there were industry experts, and I refer back to the late Jerry Sykes, who felt that almost half of the legacy resorts, and there are approximately, let's say, 1,000 of them, were in financial trouble and may be facing the need to unwind them. What is your current assessment of that perspective?
Well, from Tricom's perspective, our experience has been a very stable owner base and response. During the whole recession, we did not see any significant increase in delinquency. Looking out across the landscape of timeshare properties, I think a couple of things were learned through this recession. For those properties that are well-run and stable, owners value their timeshare vacation experience and made strides to maintain their maintenance fees and use their timeshare. So even in that severe economic time, I'd say a large majority of owners really appreciated having their timeshare, did not want to lose it, and made sure they made those payments. Where it became challenging is the resorts that were marginally run and then had a little bit to a lot of delinquency challenges and had a severe impact on them. But I think the industry overall fared very well, and we've seen that owners at large really want to use and appreciate their timeshare. And it's very resort specific. It's nothing that I think anyone can put a blanket number or percentage on, but we've had very good results at our resort.
Getting back to a topic that you've mentioned a few times, so in these situations where there may be issues of a going concern about a specific resort or a situation where a resort is really operating well. How important is that communication between the association and their owners?
I think the communication is just critical. We encourage a lot of communication with owners so that they know what's happening at their resort, from everything from activities to financial situations to any remodeling projects. This is an investment they've made, and they're counting on it, and for them to be well informed is important. We find that the more informed owners are, the more engaged they are. The more engaged owners are, the more likelihood they're going to pay their maintenance fee and use their timeshare vacation, whether they use it at their home resort or exchange it or even rent it out occasionally. But that communication is one of the pillars for a reason.
Another aspect that is out there that we're aware of is there are many board members of these legacy resorts, and we're talking about the resorts that were built approximately 30 years ago, maybe longer, who have been serving for a decade, maybe 2 decades. And when we're looking at realities of today's marketplace and we're looking at the responsibilities under the pillars, what must the boards do to develop plans for succession to bring on new board members?
It's a very important area. Board members have a challenge in attracting new board members. And as you stated, some of these legacy resorts have board members that have been dedicated for years in taking a fiduciary responsibility for their associations, and those owners hopefully are very appreciative of that because a lot goes into it. This, again, goes back to the pillar of communication. The more you communicate with your owners, the more your owners understand what's happening, what your board is doing for them, what the board's needs are as far as participation and involvement, the easier it will be to get the message out to them. In getting that message out, I think it's very important for board members not to assume that the average owner understands what it means to be a board member, what kind of time commitment is involved, what type of decisions are made, how things are made, how board members interact. It's not something for someone's personal agenda. It's for the betterment of the overall association. And if you can find people that care about that, can make a commitment to it, that's half the battle. But a lot of times I think board members assume that owners know what it means to be a board member. And for every owner out there, there's a slightly different perception of what it really means to be a board member. So I think it's important for board members to communicate. And I've actually developed a list of questions for board members to go out and talk to candidates about as to why they're thinking about being a board member or what they think it means to be a board member, because there's not enough communication about what that really is, and you don't want to leave it to owners to try to assume what that role actually means.
So a couple of things come into play here. One is you have to have a visible recruitment effort to let the owners know that the board has a need for people to run for the board. And the other aspect that I'm concerned about is owner apathy, about owners not looking at the responsibility of becoming a board member, but also not even taking the time to vote. So isn't owner apathy, owners who don't vote, come into play in terms of what the future of the resort might be?
Apathy is an unfortunate component, and it hits a lot of our areas of life and society. It's important to keep that communication going. It's important to disclose to owners what's going on at the resort and then try to engage those owners. Some resorts have had success in creating committees and in getting people onto committees active that way, and from a committee it could lead to a board position. Other associations have town hall meetings with their owners, so they don't wait for just one annual meeting, which some owners may or may not be able to attend. There's a number of ways. There's conference calls that can be set up, and you can set up groups of owners on conference calls. What's communicated by the staff at the resort is very important, because a big percentage of your owners are going to be at that resort at some time during the year or every 2-year cycle, depending on how it's set up. And it's very important that the employees are trained in communication to convey the right message to owners that it is important to be involved in your association and the reasons why. So there's a number of ways to do it, and I think it's prudent for any board to continue to try to get owner involvement. It's a key issue with every association, and every association that I see that's successful has a good percentage of owner involvement. You're never going to reach, 90% or even 100%, but a good percentage. We have some associations where we'll get a turnout of owners at the annual meeting of well over 100 people, and I've seen some associations where if they get a handful of people that show up, they're happy. So we really stress for owners to get involved, and we try to give them a lot of opportunities to get involved, and it's an ongoing part of the operation.
So from a board perspective and an owner perspective, because they're closely tied together and they're interdependent, does the composition of the board need to be clearly defined? And by that I mean board members in today's economy, do they need to have a certain skill set, or can it be diversified? How can the composition of the board actually affect the ability of the board to deal with the challenges of aging resorts and aging owners?
It's an interesting question. Sometimes board members assume that they need an attorney on their board, a CPA on their board. They go to some of the key industry components and think that they need those type of board members. Our experience has been that it's very unusual for a board to possess all the disciplines and experience necessary to address every area of timeshare operations. The critical component is for board members that are participating to recognize and engage professionals in the areas that are needed. To know the right questions to ask is more important than having all the right answers. It's a very complex business, and there's a number of different facets to it that are continually changing. Board members are most likely not going to stay up on all the legalities. They're not going to stay up on all the financial requirements for audits. They're not going to stay up on all the opportunities and ways to generate rentals and sales. But what they can do is be critical thinkers to think of the right questions to ask and where to go to find good answers for them. I think that type of a board composition is going to serve any association well.
We've touched on a lot of diverse information here, and that's what the pillars are designed to do. And this may have prompted some questions in the minds of our listeners. So if any of our listeners would like to get in touch with you about the pillars or to learn more about Tricom, how can they go about doing that?
I can give out my phone number and my email, and I'd be happy to do that. Our corporate phone number is area code 714-777-3700. I'm traveling a lot. They can leave a message, and our office manager will find me, and I will get back to them right away. If they'd like to email me, my email is bheller, Heller, at TricomManagement.com.
Brian, I appreciate you joining us today. Thanks very much for taking the time to share this information with us about the pillars and what really is needed for these legacy resorts to plan effectively for the future.
Thank you, Shep. I hope it was helpful and informative to your listeners.
And this concludes this broadcast of TimeSharing Today Radio. You know, your views, experiences, and opinions are very important. And if you'd like to comment on today's broadcast or have a suggestion for a future broadcast, please email staff@tstoday.com. Until next time, happy time.